Wow, oh wow, folks. What a day one. Like him, love him, hate him, hug him, whatever your view on Donald John Trump is. Day one was truly historic from a position of the President of the United States of America. On his day of inauguration, Donald Trump signed a massive number of executive orders, some of which will no doubt be challenged in court by leftist hate wankers whose primary mission is their loathing of America and undermining our Constitution and our societal norms. But anyway, let's get to some of these executive orders from Trump. On immigration and border, he had an executive order which was a proclamation declaring that an invasion is ongoing at the southern border, guaranteeing states protection against such invasion and invoking executive powers related to the surge of illegal immigration. He also signed an executive order entitled Protecting the American People Against Invasion in response to the unprecedented mission of illegal aliens at the southern border. Ordered the securing of the southern border by various methods, including building a border wall and ending the CBP-1 app, that's the Invasion America app, which foreign nationals have illegitimately used to claim asylum in America and come here illegitimately. A declaration of a national emergency at the U.S.-Mexico border. That no doubt will make the left go crazy. A realignment of the U.S. refugee admission program to better align with American principles and American interests and be more in line with international norms instead of this scumbag nonsense that the leftists and the Biden regime put in place, allowing anybody to falsely come here and claim they're a refugee, even from countries that have no basis for refugee status, which would be the vast majority of them. We are going to see a reversal of that. President Trump also signed executive order ending birthright citizenship. This will be highly contentious. The left will lose its mind over this. And this one is likely to face a challenge for sure in whether it survives as an executive order. It is questionable on the merit whether this is something the president has the authority to do. I don't think he does. I think this is something that must be adjudicated by the states, and the 14th Amendment must be amended to end anchor baby policy, which allows people to drop babies in this country and claim citizenship for that child who is not an American citizen. And that's been abused for a long time, and that's what needs to be addressed. That's what he's trying to address, but people are trying to pervert this and turn it into something it's not. But that will require amending the Constitution, in my view. We'll see what will happen. The restoration of the death penalty for the killing of federal agents or law enforcement. Declaring drug cartels as terrorist organizations. That one's pretty significant. Protections from foreign terrorists and other national security and public safety threats related to the southern border. And a bunch of executive orders related to his team, federal workers, many of whom aren't really his team. They're actively admitting they're going to commit treason against the United States and defy the president of the United States, whom they are sworn to work for as long as he issues lawful orders, and they seek to undermine his lawful orders. So he said the following. Here's an executive order to reform hiring in the federal government based on merit, not on skin color or sexual orientation. Well, thank you very much. We're excited about that one. A change in policy to make it easier to fire poor performers among the federal workforce. Well, I'll tell you what, I worked in the federal government and lots of simply people hanging around, suckling in the government teat, doing nothing, who will find themselves looking for something, I don't know, at Wendy's, McDonald's, Walmart, but they won't be in the federal government. And it's about time they're gone because they're just dragging down six-figure salaries from civil service. In order to hold former government officials accountable for election interference and unlawful disclosure of sensitive information, referring to the national security officials who co-signed a letter suggesting Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. A memorandum to ensure career senior executive service officials in the federal government implement the president's agenda or they are removed. SES. And that's his prerogative. I don't know why I signed a memorandum, but I guess he's making it clear. Also implemented a regulatory freeze to prevent bureaucrats from issuing any more regulations until the administration has total control of the government. A federal hiring freeze, except for the military and other exempted categories until the new administration takes control and the government's objectives are understood. And a requirement for all federal employees to return to full-time in-person work immediately. A lot of federal employees have been sitting at home collecting paychecks, and the efficacy of the federal workforce has declined precipitously as a consequence. And the cowards that oversee them and lead them refuse to make them come back to work. Well, now they will, or they won't have a job. Gender and diversity and equity inclusion. A federal policy defines male and female as the only two genders. An executive order ending diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and policies in the federal government. That will be amazing. And hopefully that will include the State Department's efforts to undermine countries abroad with its DEI fantasies. And a bunch here on energy and the environment. An executive order to maximize development and production of natural resources in Alaska to make the state a resource reservoir for the nation to ramp up fossil fuel extraction. Declaration of a national energy emergency. This is one I'm not sure I totally agree with. I'm not sure why we need a national energy emergency. We have plenty of energy. The question is simply getting more out there. An order unleashing energy production, easing the permitting processes and other regulatory systems to ensure efficient energy production. A memorandum to improve Southern California's water access by routing more water from the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta to other parts of the state for use in wildfire mitigation. A temporary withdrawal of all offshore wind leasing and an order to review government leasing and permitting practices for wind power projects. Wow. And this is the big one. An official withdrawal from the Paris climate scam, which Trump's team said would save the United States $1 trillion. It'll save us a lot of money. I don't know if it's $1 trillion, but this fantasy of the United States paying for carbon emissions when China and India aren't part of it is a joke. And also, it's illegal. Biden put us back in this illegally. Obama made the agreement, but it doesn't have the weight of law. It must be ratified by the Senate because it's a treaty. And it was never ratified by a Democrat or Republican Senate. So therefore, it's not in effect. But Biden continued to march this country illegally, unconstitutionally, as if we were subject to the Paris Climate Accord. We're not. We're not. Never have been, never will be. A formal notice to be sent to the United Nations saying that the United States will put America first in international environmental agreements, including the Paris Climate Accord, while also directing the federal government to do the same. On the military national security, in order to reevaluate and realign U.S. foreign aid, an order asking the Defense Department to come up with plans to protect the United States territorial integrity and sovereignty by targeting drug trafficking, human trafficking, illegal immigration, other criminal activities. This one may be on shaky ground. Posse comitatus comes into effect here, although the U.S. military can be used for national security along our borders and even for internal reasons domestically. There are restrictions on it that have been adjudicated by the courts, and we'll see what happens here. But we've used our military to stop the riots in Los Angeles, to ensure that black children can go to schools in Little Rock, Arkansas, against Democrat white racist objections. We've also used the military to fight forest fires. So it can be used for a lot of things, but this one will get a lot of attention. A memorandum to immediately grant 6-month interim security clearance to certain personnel hired by the administration so they can access the White House regardless of a clearance backlog Trump said was left from the Biden administration. An America First policy directive to the Secretary of State to champion American-focused interest in foreign policy. An order defining organization of the National Security Council and subcommittees. So I'm going to rearrange that apparently. Taxes and tariffs. Creating an America First trade policy that prioritizes American workers and companies while also establishing an external revenue service to collect tariffs, duties, and other foreign trade-related revenues. Now, this is ironic. We want to shrink the government, and Trump is growing it with it ERS. A memorandum declaring the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development Global Tax Deal has no force or effect in the United States. That's fantastic. That's one of the most important. The OECD lunacy fantasy of applying taxes at universal level so that no country can give themselves an advantage is ridiculous, and we are going to ignore it now. And changes in the federal government. Creation of a presidential advisory commission called the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, led by Elon Musk. The undoing of 78 of former President Biden's executive actions, executive orders, and presidential memoranda. A directive for every federal government department and agency to address the cost of living crisis. A government-wide directive to prevent government censorship against free speech. This one's ridiculous. There's no need for this. I appreciate that Trump's doing it, but the Constitution guarantees this. What we prefer to see is the officials in the National Institutes for Health, the Centers for Disease Control, the former White House staffers, and some of them we won't be able to go after because they've been pardoned for crimes they've never been charged with by the corrupt Biden regime. But all these government officials who lied, who colluded, cajoled, or coerced tech companies to silence and censor speech, like myself and others, they need to be prosecuted for their crimes and spend time behind bars for their weaponization against the Constitution. We don't need a directive. We need prosecutions. And a directive for the federal government to end the weaponization of government against the political adversaries of the previous administration. Now, this one isn't necessary, but from a public relations standpoint, it makes sense because that is exactly what the Biden regime's Department of Injustice has done. It's weaponized the justice system against its opponents. And Trump is trying to make a point that that won't happen on his watch. Also, he gave social media platform TikTok 75 days to find a U.S.-based buyer before the ban goes into effect. A full pardon for 1,500 January 6 defendants and 14 commutations for those in prison. The withdrawal of the United States from the World Health Organization after Trump did it previously in 2020. We're back out again. A Martin Luther King Jr. Day proclamation. A memorandum promoting beautiful federal civic architecture. Not really sure what that's all about. Maybe we're going to have new Roman-style columns. Who knows? An executive order restoring the name Mount McKinley after President Barack Obama renamed it Mount Denali back in 2015 and changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Now, the last one's funny. We don't own the Gulf of Mexico. Why and how we're going to change it to the Gulf of America is interesting. Again, my suggestion is the Gulf of Americas because it's between the Americas. North America, South America, Central America. That's the Gulf of the Americas. Anyway, but there you have it. These are some of the executive orders that Donald Trump has put in place, and they are going to make tongues wag and going to make heads explode on the political left. They are going to lose their absolute minds over this. Donald Trump is being Donald Trump, and America is on a different path. And frankly, any path other than the road to ruin that we were on under the Biden regime, the crooked cabal of leftists that were destroying this country and the world and global peace and security, is a step in the right direction. Some of this will be challenged legitimately. Some of it will be challenged illegitimately. We'll see what happens. Pay attention in the coming days and months as the American Criminal Liberties Union gins up its coterie of fake lawyers to go after our nation in violation of its oath to the bar. Anyway, folks, here we go. Going to be a bumpy ride ahead. Let's see what happens. Cheers.